It's raining outside. It's past midnight. You're jolted awake by the sound of footsteps from downstairs. Your heart races as you lie in bed, trying to make sense of the noise. What would you do if you found yourself in this chilling situation? In this video, we're exploring 3 real-life encounters with intruders who broke into homes and the harrowing experiences that followed. If you liked the stories, please subscribe for more. I've always loved storms. There's something about the sound of thunder and the flash of lightning that brings me a sense of comfort. It's strange, really, because most people find storms unsettling, a force of nature that disrupts peace. But for me, they've always felt like a shield from the outside world, a cozy blanket of chaos where I can relax and let go of everything else. It was one of those stormy nights, the kind that makes you want to stay up late, savoring every moment of the tempest. The rain pounded down with a steady rhythm, while the wind howled through the trees outside, making the branches sway wildly. My dad was working the night shift, so I had the house to myself. There was nothing unusual about that. He worked nights pretty often, and I was used to being alone. It was just me, the storm, and Forrest Gump playing on the TV for what felt like the 100th time. Something about that movie always made me feel good, no matter how many times I watched it. After the movie ended, I glanced at the clock and realized it was getting late, around 2 a.m. Even though I loved the storm outside, I knew it was time to call it a night. I turned off the TV and made my way upstairs to bed. The rain had picked up again, beating harder against the window. I snuggled under my blankets, ready to enjoy the sounds of the storm as I drifted off to sleep. But just as I started to relax, a different sound caught my attention. It was faint at first, but unmistakable, a light tapping against my bedroom window. At first I thought it was just the wind, maybe a branch or some loose debris being tossed around by the storm. But then it came again, harder this time. It wasn't the gentle patter of rain. It was something solid, something deliberate. My heart started to race as my mind struggled to rationalize the noise. Maybe it really was just the wind, or maybe a bird had flown into the window. I didn't want to move, didn't want to look, but then it happened again. A rock, this time unmistakable, hitting the window with a dull thud. Someone was out there. I froze under the covers, my mind racing with possibilities. It couldn't be my dad. He would have called if something was wrong. Besides, he wouldn't be throwing rocks at the window. My heart started to pound in my chest, the rhythmic beat syncing with the drumming rain outside. A few seconds later, another rock hit the window harder than before. This time, I couldn't ignore it. Whoever was out there knew I was inside. They must have seen the light from the TV just minutes ago. I had turned it off, but the room had been bright just before. They knew someone was home. I didn't dare move. I didn't want to look, didn't want to pull back the curtain. I thought that if I just ignored it, they would give up and leave. But the rocks kept coming, faster and harder, one after another, hitting the glass with increasing force. The rain was letting up, and the sound of the rocks became more distinct, more menacing. My chest tightened as I tried to think of what to do next. That's when I heard it, a low, rumbling sound coming from the street. It was the unmistakable sound of a truck engine, idling just outside. A chill ran down my spine. The rocks were bad enough, but the truck? That made it real. Someone was out there, watching me, and they weren't going away. The combination of the revving engine and the sound of the rocks hitting the window made my heart race even faster. My thoughts were scattered, 1,000 fears and questions swirling in my mind all at once. Why were they throwing rocks? What did they want? I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do something. With my heart pounding, I jumped out of bed and bolted down the stairs. My first thought was to call the police, but as I passed the front door, I caught a glimpse of something that made me freeze in place. Through the small glass window at the top of the door, I saw a face. A man's face. He was staring right at me, smiling, but it wasn't a normal smile. It was twisted, almost grotesque, like he was enjoying the fear he saw on my face. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and the smile never left his lips. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, paralyzed by terror. My body wouldn't move. I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare back at him, the sound of the storm outside fading into the background as my fear took over. Finally, my body caught up with my brain. I sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and with trembling hands, dialed 911. My voice was shaky, but I managed to tell the operator that someone was outside my house, throwing rocks and trying to scare me. She told me to stay on the line and stay inside until the police arrived. I stood there, knife in hand, waiting for any sound or movement. The truck engine revved louder, and for a brief moment I thought they might try to break in. But then, suddenly, silence. No more rocks hitting the window, no more twisted faces staring at me through the glass. Just the distant rumble of thunder and the soft patter of rain outside. I held my breath, listening, waiting. A few minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Then, in the distance, I heard the faint wail of sirens. Relief washed over me. The police were on their way. I kept the knife close, just in case, until the flashing red and blue lights pulled up in front of my house. When the officers knocked on the door, I ran to open it, practically collapsing with relief. I explained everything: the rocks, the truck, the face at the door. They searched the area but found no sign of the truck or the man I had seen. The officer tried to reassure me, but I could tell there wasn't much they could do. Without a license plate or more details, the chances of finding whoever it was were slim. As they left, I sat down on the couch, my entire body still shaking from the adrenaline. I couldn't shake the image of that man's face, the twisted smile, the wide, unblinking eyes. I still don't know what he wanted or why he was there. Maybe he was just trying to scare me, or maybe it was something worse. To this day, I don't know who he was or what his intentions were that night. The police never found him, and I never got any answers, but I'll never forget the way he looked at me and the sound of those rocks hitting my window in the middle of the storm. It's a reminder that even when we feel safe, even when the storm is just outside, sometimes the real danger is much closer than we think. It started with that classic, yet kind of annoying Snapchat notification sound. This was odd because I was pulling an all-nighter, and it was already 1 a.m. Who the hell could this be? I hadn't sent any snaps. I'd said goodnight to my girlfriend Jess a couple of hours ago, or so I mumbled in my head. Feeling the vibration from my pocket, I took my phone out to check who it was from. From Jess, the notification read. Oh, maybe she had one of those nightmares again, I thought. She often told me about her recurring nightmares. They always started in a different setting. Sometimes the ocean, a city, the woods, but they always ended the same. A person, probably a man, wearing a bloody pig mask, runs up and stabs her to death. Then she wakes up in a panic. But when I opened the snap, it wasn't anything alarming. It was just a picture of her ceiling. One of those plain, old ceiling pics. I recognized it, though. Her ceiling, with those stickers of Jupiter and the blood moon. There was no caption, which was weird. Jess never sent snaps like that, and I thought she'd been asleep for hours. If she had woken up from another nightmare, surely she would have told me in the caption, or messaged me directly. Still, I sent her a quick selfie with the caption, "You okay, babe? Another nightmare?" The message delivered, and I saw her Bitmoji in the chat, showing she was there too. Then it said, "Opened." A couple of seconds later, another snap from her. I opened it, and again it was just a picture of her ceiling. No text, nothing. "Baby, are you playing tricks on me? If you are, you're not gonna fool me, LOL. I love you, but you should try and get some rest, okay?" I replied. She opened that one almost immediately, and within about 3 seconds, she sent another snap. This time it was a picture of a knife sitting on a table, a sharp, razor-edged knife. Still, no caption. What the hell was she doing? This was not like her at all. It wasn't Halloween, and she wasn't the type to pull weird pranks like this. Maybe she was just scared from the nightmare and acting out. I sent another snap, this time with a bit more urgency. Babe, why are you acting so weird? You're freaking me out. If something's wrong, please tell me. She opened it right away, and then another snap from her. But this time it wasn't a random ceiling shot or a knife. It was a screenshot of a photo of the two of us, but it had been edited. In the picture, my eyes were bloodshot, and there was what looked like a bullet hole in my forehead. Jess, on the other hand, was perfectly fine in the photo. What the hell? I texted back, "Babe, what in the actual hell are you doing?" Right as I hit send, I got another Snapchat notification. I opened it to see a picture of Jess, but it wasn't the kind I usually got from her. She was lying in bed, fast asleep. The room was dark except for the dim light from her phone screen. Her face was peaceful, unaware. My heart sank. This wasn't a selfie. Someone else had taken that photo. The hair at the back of my neck stood up. Someone was in her apartment taking photos of her while she slept. Panic hit me like a truck. My mind raced. Should I call the cops? Should I go over there myself? I lived across town. It would take at least 20 minutes to get there, but someone was in her room right now. My phone vibrated again. Another snap from Jess. With shaking hands, I opened it. This time, it was a close-up of her face, still sleeping. Whoever was in her room was standing inches away from her now. My stomach churned. I quickly dialed 911. "There's someone in my girlfriend's apartment," I blurted out, my voice shaking. "She's asleep, and they're taking pictures of her and sending them to me from her phone. Please, you need to send someone right now." The operator stayed calm as I gave her the address and details, though I could barely hold it together. "Officers are on their way," she said, her voice reassuring. "Stay on the line with me until they get there." Minutes stretched out like hours. I kept staring at my phone, waiting for another snap, dreading what it might show. The operator tried to keep me calm, but my thoughts were spiraling. Suddenly, she spoke up. "The officers have arrived. They're approaching the building now." I could hear the faint sound of sirens through the phone. My heart raced as I imagined them storming into Jess's apartment. What were they going to find? Minutes dragged by before she spoke again. "The officers have entered the apartment," she said. Silence followed. "They're checking the rooms now," she added after another moment. Every second felt like an eternity. Finally, she said, "They found her. She's unharmed and still asleep." I let out a shaky breath, relief washing over me. But then, the operator added something that sent a chill down my spine. The front door was unlocked, and there are wet footprints leading from her bedroom and back to the door. My blood ran cold. Whoever had been there was gone, but they'd walked through her apartment, taken photos, and then vanished. I could hear Jess's voice in the background now, confused as the officers woke her up. She had no idea what had happened. On the drive over, my mind kept replaying everything. Someone had been inside her home, close enough to touch her, taking photos while she slept. They'd left behind nothing but wet footprints. When I arrived, the officers were still there. Jess was sitting on the couch, pale and shaken. She jumped up and ran into my arms the moment she saw me. I held her tight, trying to reassure her, but deep down, I knew things wouldn't feel safe again for a long time. The police had searched the building, but they found nothing. The officers asked if Jess had left the door unlocked, but she was certain she'd locked it before bed. They checked the photos that had been sent from her phone, but there was no way to trace them. The snaps were gone, like they never existed. The officers stayed for a little while longer, doing one last check, but eventually there was nothing more they could do. Jess and I sat on the couch, too shaken to say much. Whoever had been in her apartment that night was long gone. We'll probably never know who it was or why they did it, but one thing was certain. Someone had been watching her that night, and that thought would haunt us both for a long time. This incident dates back to the late 1980s, when my dad, after completing high school, moved from his village to a semi-urban area in the same state for higher studies. He lived in his cousin's house, who was also pursuing the same course. They were very close, and their daily routine was well established. In the house, they had a dog named Jolly. Every night, it was my dad's responsibility to open the terrace gates around 11, allowing Jolly to roam outside. Once Jolly was ready to come back inside, he would bark, signaling my dad to close the door. This routine was followed religiously. One interesting thing about their household was the contrast in schedules between my father and his cousin. His cousin was a morning person, always waking up early, while my father was more of a night owl. Around 1 or 2 a.m., my father would often find his cousin in the kitchen, drinking water from the fridge. It happened so frequently that it became a normal occurrence, and this routine carried on for over a year. One stormy night after dinner, my dad opened the terrace gates as usual for Jolly. But something strange happened. Jolly refused to step onto the terrace. Instead, he barked aggressively at my father. This was out of character for Jolly, who had never hesitated before. The dog seemed terrified, eventually retreating into another room where he whined and cried throughout the night. It took hours for him to finally fall asleep, leaving my father feeling uneasy. Later that night, around 1 a.m., my father followed his usual routine and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. As expected, he saw his cousin standing by the fridge. My father approached him and casually asked, "What's wrong with Jolly tonight? He refused to go out." There was no response. Thinking his cousin hadn't heard him, my dad asked again, "Jolly is sleeping in your room, right?" Still, there was no reply. Feeling a bit unsettled, my father shrugged it off and went back to bed. The next morning, he woke up unusually early, determined to ask his cousin about the previous night. When he walked into his cousin's room, he asked why he hadn't responded in the kitchen earlier. To his surprise, his cousin replied that he hadn't woken up at all and had slept straight through the night, despite the storm outside. Confused, my dad insisted, but his cousin firmly denied it, repeating that he hadn't left his bed all night. A chill ran down my father's spine as he realized something was very wrong. Suddenly, it hit him. He had forgotten to close the terrace gates after Jolly refused to go out. Panicking, he rushed to check the terrace. To his shock, the gates were closed, but not locked. Both of them inspected the house, checking all the windows and doors, but everything was locked, except for the terrace gate. Fearing they had narrowly avoided a robbery, they called the police. Officers came and searched the house and the surrounding area, finding evidence of a break-in. There were fresh footprints, indicating someone had been there for a while, yet they took nothing. The police reassured them they'd increase patrols in the area and advised them to stay vigilant. But despite their promise to investigate, no follow-up ever came. The family was shaken, especially my dad, who was haunted by the memory of the silent figure in the kitchen that night. Someone who wasn't his cousin had been in the house with them. The mystery of who that person was and why they hadn't stolen anything after breaking in puzzled my dad for years. We hope these stories gave you chills. Have you ever had a similar experience? We'd love to hear your stories and share them with our community. Drop them in the comments or send them to us directly. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Your support helps us bring more of these spine-tingling tales to life. Thanks for watching.